Om asato ma sadgamaya tamaso ma jyotirgamaya mrityormamritam gamaya aviravirmaedhi rudrayate dakshinam mukham Tena mam pahi nityam, tena mam pahi nityam. Lead us from the unreal to the real. Lead us from darkness unto light. Lead us from death to immortality. Reach us through and through ourself, O Lord, and protect us evermore from ignorance by thy sweet, compassionate face. Om Vishnur va Tripurantako bhavatu va Brahma Surendrotha va Bhanur va Shashalakshanota Bhagavan Buddhota Siddhota va Ragadvesha visharti moharahita sattvanukampodyato yas sarvai sahasamskrito gunaganais tasmai namah sarvada. The Supreme Reality and its messengers are known by various names in various traditions. But as for me, I offer my worship always to the one going by any name and belonging to any tradition, who is free from attachment and hatred, free from worldliness and delusion, who is filled with compassion towards all living beings, and who is possessed of all noble virtues. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat. Om Peace, peace, peace be unto us all. So this morning the topic is the work before us. That was the title of a talk that Swami Vivekananda gave before the Triplicane Literary Society in Madras, or now Chennai, in 1897. And so I'm not going to speak about his talk. I'm just using the same words as the title in his talk. He spoke about the work before us, meaning the work before India and before him as the leader of the movement, the Ramakrishna movement. So he and his followers and the people of India as a whole, the work that needed to be done in order to revive India, to bring her back to her to a state of strength and glory and health. And so that, of course, is not my topic this morning. I'm going to speak about the mission before us here. And but the idea of the work before us, that is the mission that we have to accomplish, the work that we have to accomplish, that title puts, or that idea expressed in the title, puts Swami Vivekananda and his work in the category of the world religions, like Christianity, Islam, Buddhism. That is, world religions with a mission, those who had a sense of world mission. So it's significant that the Swami would speak, not surprising knowing his life, but it's significant nonetheless that he would speak in terms of the work before us, because this was new to Hinduism. You don't find before in Hinduism that idea of the Sanatana Dharma or of an aspect of the Sanatana Dharma, a school within the Sanatana Dharma, the eternal religion of Hinduism. You don't find the idea of a world mission. Look at the lives of Sri Krishna, Sri Rama, you find that they didn't tell their disciples, go out into all of the world, go out in the four directions, and bring this saving knowledge to all. They brought saving knowledge, and we still study and meditate on that, which they brought thousands of years ago. So it's not that they didn't have a message of significance to the world, but it didn't come with the idea that this is something to spread to the world, to go out from India into the rest of the world and bring this knowledge to people. So that's an idea that is new to Hinduism. Hinduism was never a missionary religion. It's important to recognize and to remember that Hinduism did spread, in spite of the fact that it wasn't a missionary religion. It did spread. It has existed from as far east as the Philippines and as far west as almost to the Mediterranean world, through Afghanistan and parts of Iran, and all the way up to the borders of Syria with the Mitanni civilization, which was a Vedic civilization. And so Hinduism did spread, but it largely spread through traders and others who went out from India into other countries and took their religion with it, and other countries adopted it. Thailand, Burma, Cambodia, Vietnam. In fact, the communist government of Vietnam a few years ago was celebrating their Hindu heritage from thousands of years ago, a couple of thousand years ago. Indonesia, Java, Sumatra, Bali. Bali remains as a Hindu island within the nation of Indonesia, but Indonesia itself used to be Hindu. So Hinduism did spread, but there was not this idea that it is a missionary religion with a purpose to spread, to bring a saving knowledge to others. And Sri Chaitanya had a little bit of that idea, not as a world religion, but he did want to spread the chanting of the name of God, the singing and Sankirtan and the singing and chanting of God's name. But the idea was to spread it among the people that were there. And so with Chaitanya, you find in Hinduism something of the idea of a mission, but again, it wasn't conceived of as a world mission. And one of the reasons for that by the time of Sri Chaitanya was the prohibition of crossing the Kalapani, the black waters of the ocean. A Hindu was not to cross the ocean. Swami Vivekananda broke that, and since then many Hindu teachers have traveled all over the world and are traveling all over the world. But that was Swami Vivekananda's initiation that started that. And so, again, Swami Vivekananda's talking about the work before us and his establishing the Ramakrishna mission was a new element brought into Hinduism, bringing the missionary zeal and energy of Buddhism, Christianity, and Islam into Hinduism. But he brought it in a particular way and wanted to be careful how it was brought, because he saw the harm that had been done by missionary religions, mainly the harm done by Christianity and Islam as they spread to other countries. These two religions spread largely in spite of their sincerity. I don't doubt their sincerity and the goodness of the many of the people. But because of a narrow theology, a narrow idea of the world, a narrow idea of religion, a narrow idea of truth, they spread through destruction, through destroying cultures, through destroying nations, through the killing of many, many innocent people. It was both religions were spread largely by the sword. And so Swami Vivekananda, of course, was not in favor of that. He was not in favor of conversion. That is, going out and trying to turn people from one religion into another. Oh, you're a Christian? Well, you should become Hindu. So now come to me and I will baptize you in the name of the Hindu deities. and you should give up your Christianity and become a Hindu. No, he didn't believe in that. He said his ideal was to make a Christian a better Christian, a Jew a better Jew, a Hindu a better Hindu, a Buddhist a better Buddhist, and to spread the life-giving principles of Vedanta so that people could use them as they find appropriate in their own path of growth. That is, he respected the integrity not only of the individual person, but he respected the integrity of culture, the integrity of nations. And so he wanted the life-giving principles of Vedanta to be spread and taught so that people could take these up and use them as they found best. So he, again, by respecting different cultures, he also didn't have the idea that we should import Indian culture and turn people into cultural Indians as well. No, he saw the harm that had been done by both Christianity and Islam. Christianity by trying to turn everyone into a European, and Islam by trying to turn everyone into an Arab. And so he wanted our teachers to go out and to respect the different cultures, the different nations, teach the principles so that people could learn to live them and express them in their own, according to their own cultural and individual genius. So, let me address a little bit Swamiji's sense of mission before I come to the topic of the work before us, we who are here. So Swamiji's sense of mission, Sri Ramakrishna, Swamiji saw, had come for the welfare of the world. And you can see in some of Sri Ramakrishna's statements that recognition that he himself had. And he trained Swamiji to send his message out into the world. It was a deliberate training, a conscious, intentional training that Sri Ramakrishna gave to Swamiji. Among all of the disciples, he trained all of them, householder and monastic. But even among the monastic disciples, it was Swamiji that he taught how to spread his message. And the other disciples write that oftentimes Sri Ramakrishna would pull Narendra aside and talk to him in private about such matters. So Swamiji knew, both from Sri Ramakrishna and from his own insight, that Sri Ramakrishna had brought to earth a great spiritual power, that through his austerities, through his realizations, he had accumulated tremendous spiritual power, and he had generated tremendous liberal, life-giving ideas. And Swamiji saw that this power and these ideas were for the welfare of the world. They were for the welfare of India, but not just for the welfare of India. Swamiji saw the welfare of India, the health and the strength of India as critical to the welfare of the world, because he felt that India had a special place in the world, a special message to give to the world. But he saw that these teachings and this power were to be used for the welfare of all. That's why Swamiji didn't go around establishing temples, because he was always afraid that the temple culture of India would consume the power which Sri Ramakrishna had brought, and he was fiercely opposed to that people would take the power which Sri Ramakrishna had brought for all people, religious people as well as non-religious people, Hindus as well as people of other religions or of no religion. He was afraid that people would take that power and enshrine it in temples and surrounded by ritual worship, where priests or monks would officiate and guard and protect that power, holding it for themselves and for the select few. He knew that the power Sri Ramakrishna had brought was meant for all beings, and it had to be spread freely and widely and without that kind of priestcraft. So So Swamiji saw this about Sri Ramakrishna. He also, when traveling around India, first before coming to the West, and then after coming to the West and traveling around, through both experiences, he understood the problems of the modern world. He had had a very good education with a brilliant mind, which was encyclopedic in its the information that he had from his studies and from his tremendous memory power. But then added to that was his exploration of India, his years spent wandering through India, meeting the poor and meeting the wealthy and the powerful. All levels of Indian society, I should say, not just Hindu, but all levels of Indian society. And then traveling to America, he saw much along the way to America on the boat, stopping in different ports along the way. And then when he came to America, he traveled around with a lecture bureau. That was in one sense, it was a great mistake that Swamiji got himself tied up with the lecture bureau. After the Parliament of Religions, he was cheated by the lecture bureau, promised that he would get a lot of money that he could use for starting his work in India. But it turned out that the lecture bureau was not, it didn't keep its side of the bargain as Swamiji, and the work didn't turn out to be what Swamiji had expected. But that also was part of divine providence. We can see now. Swamiji had to get the help of a lawyer to get him out of the contract from the lecture bureau so that then he could teach freely as he wanted to. But the fact that he had to travel into little towns and in remote parts of the United States, in coal mining country in West Virginia and other such places, meant that he saw intimately this country also in the beginning months of his, after the Parliament of Religions. And so through these experiences of India and of the United States and of other countries along the way, he had an intense awareness of the situation of the modern world. And so his mission came as a response to that, taking the ideas of Sri Ramakrishna and the spiritual power of Sri Ramakrishna. It was Swamiji's work to apply those ideas to the actual human society as it is for the welfare and uplift of the whole world. And so that was where his mission was developed. His sense of mission itself came from Sri Ramakrishna. He didn't have a sense of mission to begin with. It was Sri Ramakrishna who forced him to have a sense of mission. He tried to get out of all responsibility for a world mission. He wanted to spend his life just absorbed in meditation. But Sri Ramakrishna forced him to take up the work. When Sri Ramakrishna was about to pass away from cancer of the throat and he could hardly speak, he wrote a note saying that Naren will teach people. And Naren read it and said, "No, I won't do that." And then Sri Ramakrishna gasped out the words, "Your bones will make you do it." And Swamiji's bones would make him do it because Sri Ramakrishna controlled his bones, his bones had been dedicated to Mother Kali, and she extracted that work from him. And so gradually the Swami had to accept the sense of mission. So sometimes I speak about Swami Vivekananda's mission. That's not the topic today. Now I want to move on to our mission. What it is, our part in that mission, that is. So our more limited mission is the subject today. What our movement's mission is, in brief, what our Vedanta Society of Greater Houston's mission is, and what our individual mission is as devotees of Sri Ramakrishna and Swami Vivekananda. So those are the three concentric circles. The individual, the Vedanta Society, and then the movement itself. So first, our individual mission, because that's the easiest to speak about. that being the more restricted, what it is that I and you are to do as devotees of Sri Ramakrishna, the Holy Mother, and Swami Vivekananda. So, taking the message of Sri Ramakrishna, our principal goal and our principal mission is to realize God, and nothing less than that. Nothing less than that, nothing other than that, except that you can say, well, realize God, or realize identity with the self, or realize identity with the whole universe. Whatever our concept of reality is, but to realize that which is real, that which is true. And we use the word God as a placeholder for all of that. Whether we mean God as the one to whom we pray and whom we worship, or whether we mean self-realization, or whether we mean identity with the whole universe. All of that is subsumed under the word God. So to realize God is our goal, to be deep and profound, as Sri Ramakrishna taught, and also to be as broad as the sky. So those two things we are to contain within ourselves as we seek spiritual reality. To be deep and profound, and yet to be as broad as the sky. So in prayer, worship, meditation, japa, our study, everything, to go as deep as we can, to plunge the depths of reality as far as we can go in this life. But at the same time, to have an expansive heart, a broad, liberal outlook, one which respects all others. That has been the tremendous harm that religion has done to the world. Yes, religion has done great good to the world. It's been the greatest benefactor of humanity because it gives meaning and it gives purpose. And it opens the gates to immortality. But it's also done tremendous harm because religion was most often taught in a very narrow context. That my religion is true, everybody else is wrong. As Sri Ramakrishna said, everybody thinks that their watch is correct. And so everybody thinks that, oh, my religion is correct, everybody else is wrong. And there's an insecurity in that belief that my religion is right and everybody else is wrong, which makes people aggressive. Because I speak of my religion and everyone doesn't accept it. And so that makes me insecure, and so then I try to force my religion on others. And that is what has happened at a huge scale, especially with the missionary religions, with the exclusion of Buddhism, which didn't spread with the sword. But otherwise, missionary religions have spread with the sword, and destroyed everything in their path because they alone had the truth, everybody else was wrong, and others had to make way for the true religion. So no, Sri Ramakrishna wanted us to be as deep and profound as the greatest fanatic, a religious fanatic, but as broad as the sky, with the most liberal outlook towards others, the ability to see truth everywhere, to see goodness and truth everywhere, and to appreciate it everywhere. So that was Sri Rama, the central message. There are many other things, of course, to take from Sri Ramakrishna, but the very central message around which everything else that we learn from him revolves is spirituality, to plunge deep into spirituality and to be as broad as the sky. Swami Vivekananda added to that, though it came from Sri Ramakrishna also, but Swami Vivekananda made it explicit. The fact that it was not explicit is clear from the fact that other disciples of Sri Ramakrishna didn't believe this was part of his mission. And what I'm speaking about is Swamiji's call to service. Swamiji saw that that also was part of Sri Ramakrishna's mission, that Sri Ramakrishna himself spent his life in service to others. Anytime anyone came, a seeker came, no matter how much Sri Ramakrishna had spoken, how tired he was, he would give himself to teaching other seekers. And so Swami Vivekananda saw that he had given himself in service, Sri Ramakrishna, and then Swamiji also conceived of service as a spiritual path. His whole idea of karma yoga and the worship of God in man. And so Swamiji taught service as an intrinsic part of our spiritual life, as a spiritual practice, not as a byproduct, not as something extra we do because we have a little extra time, so we want to do something good in that extra time. No, as a spiritual practice, as part of our seeking for reality. We seek it also through serving others. So Swamiji wanted us to internalize a sense of service, that is, not just to read about what Swamiji said, but to imbibe that spirit of service. And as part of that spirit of service, he wanted us to imbibe a spirit of sacrifice, self-sacrifice. That Swamiji said that if you give your last morsel of food to a hungry person and you die from hunger yourself, then you will immediately be free because you have given to another. He said that unselfishness itself is religion. And so that sense of sacrifice, the sense of service, also with Swamiji's mission was to call out the divinity within all and teach us to manifest that divinity. In fact, Swamiji said that my ideal can indeed be put into a few words, and that is to teach unto humanity their own divinity and how to make that manifest in every movement of life. How to make divinity, your own divinity, manifest in every one of your movements, every movement of life. So that was his message, he said. And so to internalize that idea of the manifesting the glory of the self, that all knowledge, all truth, all goodness, all beauty, all joy, bliss, is in the nature of the self itself. It's there, it's just that we haven't tapped it. It's hidden, it's covered by a cloud of delusion. So learning to manifest that divinity was part of the central goal of all of Swamiji's teachings. And then part of his mission also was to spread these ideas to others. Not beating them over the head with the ideas and saying, you have to accept it because this is the truth, and what you've been doing and thinking is wrong, now you have to change that, and you have to take these ideas that I'm giving you. No, nothing of that, but to make the ideas accessible to people. And those who want to hear, let them, to help them learn, learn to imbibe and to manifest these ideas. So spreading the work was also part of his mission. And then, of course, there's Holy Mother, who is as much a part of this movement as the other two, Sri Ramakrishna, the Holy Mother, and Swamiji. And in Holy Mother, we see the bringing of spirituality into every movement of life, as Swamiji had spoken of. And so in Holy Mother, we see that that's what she did. Everything that she did was filled with her spiritual touch. And she taught us how to make the whole world our own, so that no one is a stranger, but the whole world is our own. To see the whole world as our own, to see ourselves in the whole world and the whole world within myself. And Holy Mother also taught us to manifest soft power. That's something that's spoken about a lot, not spoken about enough. It should be spoken about more. But it is a concept that is spoken about nowadays in the international field, soft power. There's hard power, where you hit a country over the head and make it submissive to you by military force or by economic pressure or by sanctions or by threat, whatever. That's hard power. But Holy Mother taught soft power. That is the power, the transforming power of love, the transforming power of acceptance, the transforming power of the all-embracing love which she possessed and which she manifested, which was not a sentimental affair. It was a tremendous power, a transformative power. And so how to manifest soft power, transformative power. So, from Sri Ramakrishna, the realization of God and with the mind as broad as the sky. From Swami Vivekananda, the spirit of service with a spirit of love for all beings, a spirit of sacrifice, the manifestation of the glory of the self within, and helping others to manifest that glory of the self as well. And Holy Mother, the ability to see and to relate to and to act with the world as one's own through love and the manifesting of soft power. So now that's in general for the individual, what we are to do. These are things that we are to find ways to internalize them as individuals, to try to live up to them. These are very high ideals. So it's not that you read a book or two and suddenly you are there. No, these are ideals that inspire us and lead us forward throughout our lifetime. Something that we move towards throughout a lifetime. So now in more general, our work as part of a movement. And then I'll come last to the Vedanta Society. Our work as part of the Ramakrishna movement. So one thing is that we should work to support the movement. That's not a selfish, there's individual selfishness, and then there's organizational selfishness, and ethnic selfishness, racial selfishness, national selfishness. This I don't mean in a selfish way, that we should promote the work of the Vedanta Society in the sense that let us get ahead of other organizations, let's push them out of the way because we're the ones with the answers. No, not that sort of narrow corporate or organizational or religious zealotry. But loving the movement itself. So this means those who have come to the movement, who have known something about Sri Ramakrishna, Swami Vivekananda, the Holy Mother, and about the movement itself, they see the great value of it and want to dedicate themselves to it. And so it's for all of us who have come to the movement in any sense, as devotees, as monastics, as friends or associates or well-wishers of the movement, to help the movement move forward and to do its work, to identify with the movement. So to help the movement, and that comes through identification with the movement. The Ramakrishna movement for us is not, and I don't mean just for us monks, but for all of us who are devoted to the ideals of Sri Ramakrishna. The Ramakrishna movement is not something out there that I, sitting here, am going to dedicate myself to that out there. No, all of us are part of the Ramakrishna movement. The Ramakrishna movement is not limited to the Ramakrishna order. The Ramakrishna movement means all of those who share these ideals. And so to identify with the movement through love for its ideals and to help in its work and in the support of the movement, to manifest the ideas of the movement within our own lives. That is, to try to become, as we can, embodiments of the ideals of the movement. That's a lifetime's work, or maybe several lifetimes of work. But we begin now, trying to manifest the ideals of the movement within myself, including its broad liberality. To, as I said, to identify with the movement means to love the movement, and to love the movement also means to love the members of the movement, to love those who come to Sri Ramakrishna. That's not always easy, because all of us come with our personalities. And one of the things you find if you live in a monastery or an ashram, permanent ashram, not an ashram where you go for a few days retreat and come away, but if you live in an ashram, that's your home, in an ashram or a monastery, you find that people from all walks of life, from all kinds of different backgrounds, all kinds of different personalities, all kinds of different interests, have come together and live together. And you find oftentimes, especially if it's a larger center where there are a fair number of people, you find that many of these people are people that you never would have chosen as your friends if you were just out in the world randomly associating with people. Even if you met them at the office, some of them are people you would never have chosen as your friends. And yet here you are living with them. And so one of the things that we have to learn to do is to love the members of the movement. That doesn't mean social liking, that, oh, this is my best friend. No, because of the difference of temperaments and everything. Personal chemistry doesn't always work between every two people. But aside from personal chemistry, aside from social likes and dislikes, to have a deep and abiding love for everyone who comes to the movement. That's something that we can work towards. And in time it becomes natural. In time it's not an effort, it's something that comes quite naturally. To see everyone who comes to Sri Ramakrishna as a beloved person. I remember the first time I really thought about that, it was many years ago. I was a young Swami, I was only 32 or 33 probably. I'd come to Hollywood after many years in India. And there was one of the elderly nuns who was a very sweet and a very good person, but she could be annoying. And so some people came to see me from Austin, Texas, as a matter of fact. They came to see me in Hollywood. I was living in Trabuco, but I'd come up to Hollywood. And they came to see me, and I asked Bhaktiprana to show us around because she knew the Hollywood Center much more than I did. I was still new in Hollywood. And so she showed us around, and she went on too long in her explanations. And so the guests from Austin, they got annoyed with her, and they were very ugly towards her and very insulting towards her. And I felt so hurt because I saw that, yes, Bhaktiprana, this nun, she could be annoyingly talkative about something that they weren't interested in. At the same time, I saw, no, she's dedicated her whole life in a beautiful way to Sri Ramakrishna, Holy Mother, Swamiji, and to her Guru. And to see her insulted by people was more than I could bear. I didn't say anything to them, but it hurt me deeply. And then I realized, no, that's because I can see that, yes, from an external standpoint, I can see why they got annoyed with her. But I don't approve at all of their expressing it towards her because she is a sacred person. She's a person who's dedicated her whole life. And for that, I felt such a deep appreciation that any words insulting her insulted me very deeply also. So, to learn to love the movement and its members, to appreciate the importance of community, that is, Sangha. Community, Sangha. The Ramakrishna Sangha, again, is not just the order. Sometimes we use it that way, as the Ramakrishna Sangha means the Ramakrishna monastic order. But actually, the Ramakrishna Sangha is much bigger than that. It includes all of those who are devoted to the ideals of Sri Ramakrishna. So to feel the importance of community and to appreciate the significance of spiritual community, what Martin Luther King called the beloved community. During the Great Depression, something people nowadays are thinking about a lot because we're in an economic downturn which is the worst since the Great Depression. Well, there have been many economic crises in American history, but what we're in the midst of now is the worst since the Great Depression of 1929 and the early 30s. But during the Great Depression, it's said that no Mormon was on the public dole. That is, they didn't have to go to public sources for food and for financial help. Why? Because the Mormon community took care of its own. That's a wonderful thing that the Mormon community took responsibility for their own people. They had such a strong sense of community. such a strong sense of commitment to their community that they took care of each other. When millions of people were out of work, people were starving, but they went out of their way to help each other, to support each other. And so learning that value of community, that's something that we have to learn, something we have to imbibe. If we learn that, then we will become a power in society. And again, not a power to use over others or in place of others, but a power for good within society. To the extent that we learn that. The Sikhs and the Muslims, you see with them that deep sense of community, great sense of community and of belonging together and of helping each other. And so that we have to imbibe something of that sense of community. The Hindu community in America is the richest ethnic community in America. By some way, in such things, there are always different ways of measuring. And so according to some measurements, it's the Jewish community which is tied with the Hindu community, or maybe a little richer, but in other ways of calculating, the Hindu community is the richest. That doesn't matter. I'm not bringing that up to say that we're competing with the Jewish community, just to say that we are either the Hindu community is either the richest community in America, or practically the richest community in America. And what a tremendous power for good the Hindu community could be. If there were a deeper sense of community, not just we're all Bengalis or we're all Gujaratis or we're all Maharashtrians, but we are Hindu, and to be mutually supportive, mutually encouraging. So we need to develop that sense of larger community. And that people are trying to do. There are many people who are working at that, and that's a very good thing. But as we work at it, the followers of Sri Ramakrishna and Swami Vivekananda, we have to do that from their perspective. That is, from a broad, liberal perspective, not a narrow perspective that we want Hindu rights. No, we want rights for everyone. Not that we want to promote the Hindu community and forget about others. No, we want to promote all. But also recognizing every Hindu as my brother, every Hindu as my sister. So there's so many beautiful temples that have been built in this country, beautiful Hindu temples that have been built, a number of them here in Houston itself. But for many, unfortunately, and this is a mild criticism, for many, unfortunately, religion is purely transactional. I'll give money to the temple and I'll get some benefit from God. I'll give some money for a special puja, and then the deity will bless my children so they get good grades and so forth. No, that was one of the reasons why Swami Vivekananda said, do not let this mutt, this ashram, this monastery, and he meant, at that time there was just Belur Mutt, but he means all of our centers, let this not become a Thakur Bari. That means a temple in the ordinary sense. Our centers should not become temples in that sense. Temples have their important place. People come to me and ask, we love the Vedanta tradition, can we get married here? And I have to tell them, no, we don't do that here. You can go to one of the community temples. Or somebody calls and says, my mother died, is there any provision for Shraddha, performing Shraddha? No, we don't do that here. You can go to one of the temples. The priests can help you with that. So they have a great place to play, but that's not our place. Again, what we want to do is to spread the ideas, to spread the teachings, and to practice. So in that sense, we have worship in our centers also, but our worship is not transactional worship, where you come and give some money and hope that good things will come to you. No, ours is worship because we're worshiping God, because God is the value. A friend once told me that on Easter he went into a church and so many people had given pots of Easter lilies for the church on Easter. And each one of them had for my mother, for my father, for my deceased grandfather, for my beloved wife, and so forth. And so he said, I was struck with wonder, didn't anyone give lilies for Jesus? Is it all just for the human people you love? Is good that you love others, your family members in particular, good that you love others. But doesn't anyone give flowers for Jesus, out of love for Jesus? And so in our temples, the worship is for the love of God. And so bringing this back, I was talking about community, bringing this back to community. You see what tremendous things have been done to build these beautiful and highly expensive temples in Houston and all across the United States. A tremendous amount of the Hindu community's wealth has been spent for that. But let people spend wealth not just for transactional means, that I give something and to get my name on a building, the Swami Atmarupananda public auditorium at the Hindu temple, because I gave a large amount of money, so I get to put my name on the building. Let us use the wealth of the community for the welfare of the community, not for my name and my fame, not to get just good grades so my kids get good grades in school, or so my son gets a good wife, or my daughter gets a good husband, or something like that. No, let us learn the power of a loving community which loves not just itself but others as well, because again, that's the danger of a strong sense of community, that usually community is based on the sense that I love the in-group and I hate the out-group. Not that. But I love the in-group, and through that also I love the out-group as well. I love everyone. But that sense of community and that sense of the welfare of Hinduism itself, of the Hindu Dharma, of the ideas, promoting the ideas, not just building big temples so that we'll have some place to congregate for our social affairs and things. That's a huge waste of resources, a huge waste, a shameful waste of resources. I'm not against the temples, but there are much better things and spiritual things that the money can be used for, instead of just building more and more temples. And then you build a temple, and then one group doesn't agree with the other group, and so they split off, and now we have to make another temple because I can't get along with these people. That's a shame on the community, a shame on the community. None of our people should participate in that whatsoever. So let us build community, let us support to the temples, let us support things, but let us work towards the greater good, not just building temples for our so that our children have a place to learn their mother tongue and so forth. So, learning the value of community. So all of these are things that, as parts of the movement, to support the movement, to identify with the movement, to learn to love the members of the movement because they share the same ideal, because the ideal is so important to me, anyone sharing that ideal is dear to me. Whether I would socially like them as my best friend or not, that's an insignificant thing. Forget about that. But I love them because they share the same ideal that I do. So then now in the last bit of the talk, our work here in Houston. So what about our little center here, which is a small center, even among the Vedanta centers, which are small in general and very small compared to the community Hindu temples, because we don't do ceremonies for the public, and so we don't get the sort of resources that community temples get. So all of our centers are comparatively small. But this, even among the small Vedanta centers, this is a small Vedanta center as small as a Vedanta center. So what we need to do is, first of all, to foster the spiritual growth of our members and associates, to foster the spiritual aspirations and the growth through teaching, through providing places for practice and so forth, and to carry on the mission of the whole movement, that each of our centers should be an outpost of the movement itself, where its ideals are being spread into the community. Again, not by hitting people over the head with them, but by making them accessible, making them available to people, and those who are interested, teaching them how to live these ideas. And then serving the local needs as best we can. So these three levels, fostering the spiritual growth of our members and associates, and carrying on the general mission of the movement, and then serving the local needs. So we need to address all three of these levels. Now your resident minister, the body of your resident minister just turned 70. I don't usually talk about such things, but let me mention, because it's pertinent here, just turned 70, so he probably has maybe 10 more years of active work. And during that time, I will dedicate myself the best that I can to doing what we can here at the center. But within 5 or 10 years, at least within 10 years, better within 5, but at least within 10 years, we'll need another person here at the center, whether it's a brahmachari who has come to join the order, or whether it's another Swami who has come from somewhere else, or in the absence of those, a dedicated worker, dedicated devotee, a single dedicated devotee who comes to live here. That will be necessary just because of increasing age of your resident minister. So in fostering the spiritual growth of members, our emphasis should be on spiritual understanding. That is, a large part of spiritual life is changing our ways of thinking. Changing our ways of thinking. That's central to spiritual life. People criticize us, the Ramakrishna movement, for too many talks and talks about religion rather than doing anything. Well, there's some truth to that, I'll admit. But the talking about spiritual truths is extremely important, because central to spiritual life, one of the central practices in spiritual life is to change our thinking. And we do that by learning how to think about myself, how to think about the world, how to think about my relationship to the world, how to think about the ultimate goal of life. So providing spiritual understanding. A second thing that we are to provide is to provide a place for and information on, help with spiritual practice. Providing spiritual practice, how to practice, a place to practice, means to practice. And then third, the development of character. That was extremely important to Swami Vivekananda and to Sri Ramakrishna and Holy Mother. But Sister Nivedita says, it's not found, as far as I can see, in something recorded in Swamiji's teachings, though it's consistent with his teachings. But Sister Nivedita says that Swamiji, according to Swamiji, character is spirituality. That's an equation. Character is spirituality. And so our centers should serve as a place for the building of character. So for developing spiritual understanding, for teaching and helping with spiritual practice, and then for the development of character. These are the three main services that we should give. Place for practice, we should provide this as a place for practice and for study. Carrying on the mission of the movement, our emphasis, as I said, has been on ideas, and that will remain. But the ideas, we should be careful to see that the ideas that we give are given with a view to practice. That is, ideas for the sake of ideas are just for the entertainment of brain cells. They don't do anything else. but ideas for the sake of life, ideas that can transform our life. That's what we want and what we want to emphasize. There's a great importance in providing for retreats where people can intensify their spiritual life over a weekend or over a week, etc. When I was at Ridgely Manor, that was what I saw as the great benefit of having places like Ridgely Manor. That there people could come, spend a day, they could spend a weekend, they could spend a week, and some people came and stayed for months, where they could deepen their spiritual practice and their spiritual study. So our city centers like this are essential, because this is where the people are. And this is where we reach people, where the population is condensed. But we also need retreats, places where people can get away from their ordinary lives and spend a couple of days or a few days in more intense practice. That Sri Ramakrishna emphasized over and over through the gospel. Swami Vivekananda talked about it. He said once, for instance, not the only thing he said about this, but just one example, he's speaking about the Catskill Mountains in New York, where Ridgely Manor is now. He said it would be wonderful if we could get a piece of property in the Catskills, a piece of property for a retreat where people could practice these ideas. And of course, he took disciples of his to Thousand Island Park for a retreat. And so retreats are an essential part of our work. Swami Vidyatmananda, an American monk who passed away a number of years ago, he told me, Swami Vidyatmananda, John Yale, told me back in 1981, said that I, Swami Vidyatmananda, think that the future of Vedanta in the West is at centers like Gretz, where we're out in the countryside, where people can come and stay for a few days. And I have always agreed with him that that is part of the future, an important part of the future of Vedanta, is providing places for more intensive study and practice. And so in that regard, I've been looking at retreat properties, not that we have money for it now, but hopefully we will have. And there are beautiful pieces of property within an hour and 20 minutes of Houston, where we could buy land and eventually build a retreat. I've looked at several pieces of land which would be ideal for that if we have the money for it. Then, as far as our society here, let me just, before I conclude, say that we have need for building projects here at the center. I'll just mention them. This is just for your information, because I'm talking about our center here in Houston now, after talking about the movement and then the individual members of the movement, talking about our specific center. That the front of our temple in the wintertime is a difficult place for people to enter into because of rain and cold. People have to take off their shoes outside and walk on what often is wet, cold cement and come inside. So we want to enclose the front of the temple so that people come into an enclosed space where they can take off their shoes and leave their rain jackets or umbrellas or whatever. So that's the immediate projects that we want to do here are that, enclosing the front, then enclosing the sides here so that we have a place for dining and other activities on the side, the side under the patios on the two sides, so that we can move the dining out of the front hall here and move it here, and also give us more room. But we also need a garage for the car, a storeroom. We have no storage here in this building. This was not built with the idea of storage needs. And so we need a storeroom, a garage, a storeroom, and workshop. And then after those things are taken care of, we also need another building here in the lawn area where we have more room for office space, a library, a larger library, meeting rooms, etc. Because we right now are cramped with it. The building which we have is a wonderful and beautiful building built through the great dedication of a number of devotees and their great sacrifices to put it up. But we want the work to grow, and so we need more space for activities, and so eventually another building out here also. So we have a variety of building projects that we want to do eventually, including acquiring a retreat property. Again, just on the note of the retreat, let me say before I close that most of our centers in America have retreat properties. So we also would like to have one. Now, I said that part of our purpose also is to serve local needs. And that we can do. We do in a very small way, but that as time goes on, and if we have more space, again, everything requires space, and more people to volunteer to help with such things. And I know some of you are there who are ready to volunteer. We just have to have space and organized activities that people can fit into. One thing that we can provide for the community is our perspective on interreligious dialogue. Because most religions in America nowadays, they participate in interreligious dialogue to some extent. Not the more fanatical fundamentalist members of different religions, because they think other religions are wrong, so why would we dialogue? But the more liberal elements of all religions in this country, they get together for interreligious dialogue. But it's not from the perspective of Sri Ramakrishna. It's from a much more limited perspective. That is, that I love my faith. I think my faith is right. I don't understand your faith, and I don't see why you believe in it. But I believe you have a right to practice it. Even if you're wrong, I believe you have a right to practice it, and I see some interesting and beautiful things about it. That's not our perspective on interreligious dialogue. The usual perspective, again, let me just express it a different way, is that if we don't sit together and be friendly with each other, then we'll fight. So it's better to be friendly and get to know each other, and just so that we are on friendly terms, but that's as far as it goes. But no, from the Ramakrishna tradition, we have to come to the standpoint of loving other traditions, of seeing the beauty and the truth of other traditions. And to recognize that all religions in their respective ways are leading towards the same goal. So that's part of what we can provide to the community. Then through service projects, which we engage in small ways from time to time, in time that we can do in a bigger way, but it was starting slowly with occasional food drives and other things like that. And then being open to the community itself, welcoming people from whatever background, whatever ethnic, racial, whatever belief background people come to us here at the center who are curious about what we're doing, to be welcoming and inclusive in that which we do. So my time is up, and this is a brief discussion of the work before us, the work that we have as individual members of the Ramakrishna movement. Then the work that we have as a society, the Vedanta Society of Greater Houston, within that movement, an outpost of that movement. And then the mission of the movement itself as a whole. And so with that, I will see if there are any questions. There are no questions. Okay. So I will give announcements, and if by the end of the announcements someone has written in a question, I'll take it. Otherwise, we will stop. So for announcements, on Tuesday we will have the Gita class as usual at 7:30 in the evening, live streamed. On Thursday we will, as usual, have the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna class at 11 o'clock, live streamed. And next Sunday, I believe the talk next Sunday is on basic concepts, reincarnation. I know that's one of the Sundays this month, but I believe it's next Sunday. The basic concepts of Vedanta series. I already treated dharma and karma, and now the associated doctrine of reincarnation on Sunday. So, and then on October 17th, I've already started announcing, and I'll continue announcing until then. October 17th, we'll have our Durga Puja, worship of God as Mother. But this year, because of the pandemic, it will not be outside. We won't put up a big tent. It will be here in the shrine, the temple, in the chapel. And it will also not be open to the public. Only those who are helping with the actual preparation and offerings to the Divine Mother will be in here. But it will be live streamed. And then afterwards, we want to make a provision for people who wish to come and make pranam one by one or in family groups to make pranam or to pay their respects to the image safely and securely. So that will be on October 17th. So with that, I will give a closing chant, and we will see you next time. Om madhuvatarithayate madhuksharanti sindhavaha madhvirna santoshadhihi madhunaktamutoshasi madhumatparthivagum rajaha madhudyaurastu nah pita madhumanno vanaspatir madhumagum astu suryaha madhvirgavo bhavantu naha. Om Madhu, Om Madhu, Om Madhu. For us who seek the truth, and for all living beings, may the winds blow sweetly, may the rivers flow sweetly, may the herbs yield us sweetness. Sweet be the night and the break of day, sweet be the very dust of the earth. May the heavens pour down sweetness upon us. May the trees, lords of the forest, bear us sweetness. May the sun shed its sweetness upon us. May all the directions pour forth sweetness. Om, sweetness, sweetness, sweetness.